what I've lived through. I'm an unemployed teacher. I have 2 bachelor's degrees from UC Berkeley. I have a master's degree in education, teaching middle school math. I have been unemployed for over 5 years. My unemployment is not even existent anymore. I'm lucky to be able to earn enough by tutoring to pay my $336 a month for the room that I rent in a house. I'm lucky also to be able to pay my car insurance after that. There is no money. There are no jobs. I volunteer my time and I tutor. Regardless of what this economy is, I continue to give service wherever I can. I lost everything I had in the Bay Area, 4.4 acres in the San Francisco Bay Area that was worth $3.5 million that I was unable to sell in 2009 for $500,000. I lost everything that I may have had. I will never be able to retire. I have no medical coverage. I have no hope. I have also $27,000 in student loans, and the only way that I think I'll ever be able to pay those off is when they deduct it from whatever little bit of Social Security I might have. I worked for 27 years in the service industry before I became a single mother of 4. I then went to UC Berkeley as a single mother of 4 and ended up as the commencement speaker for the Department of Psychology. I am no dummy, and I am not lazy. And I think that the Ryan budget is the worst possible excuse that we have seen in my lifetime. I have worked in political campaigns and I've worked for health coverage for all since the 1960s. I campaigned for John Fitzgerald Kennedy. We need to change. We need to have the ability to be able to give to one another in a way that we can all afford to live. And that doesn't mean a ridiculous stratified society. It means that those at the top are going to have to give so that everybody's got a little. We're not asking to have a mansion. I'm not asking for a house right now, but it would be nice to have one again. I'm just asking for equity, and I'm asking that you realize that I am a human being. I have served and I continue to serve. And by God, we deserve better than this.
Good evening, Congressman. Thank you for coming to Elk Grove and listening to the community tonight. My name is Jake Rambo. I represent the 6th District of the Elk Grove Unified School District. We are home to almost 62,000 students at 64 schools, the 5th largest school district in the state of California. As you know, education in California is really struggling. We continue to see the legislature in this state defer funding that is desperately needed for our kids into other projects and other priorities. But one of the things that has really limited our ability to the flexibility that we need to meet some of the needs of our diverse community, where we have both inner city schools and country schools and everything in between, is No Child Left Behind. You know, it was definitely right. I think it was enacted with the right goals and purposes in mind, but it's certainly well past date for renewal and reevaluation. But I'll be interested in your thoughts and comments on what Congress can do to help school districts, particularly Elk Groves, address get the flexibility we need to educate kids as we see best here at the local level. Again, thank you.
Hello, Congressman. My name is Nikita Kostyuk, and I'll be voting for the very first time in November, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And this is actually my very first town hall meeting, and I like all the love that I'm feeling, especially from the individuals in the back. Hey guys. I'm a student at Sacramento State. I make a salary of $200 a week working at a trucking business, but I'm really not here to complain. I'm just setting a backdrop for my personal concern, which is about gas and gas prices. Yesterday, it cost me $60 to fill up my tank, which is 30% of my weekly salary. That's really my main concern right now, personally and for the business at which I work with, is the cost of gas, which is especially rising in California more than anywhere else. Thank you for your time, Congressman.
Thank you for your time. I'm going to be very direct on this. Is SB 249. SB 249. Yeah, Randy Bartz, 12-year Elk Grove resident. Not to give you a shopping list of pros and cons. This one concerns law enforcement. I'm a little concerned about SB 249. It runs the gamut of gun grabbing bills. The exception with this is that law enforcement officers are likewise stripped of these weapons that are mentioned in this bill. Law enforcement has the right to defend themselves on and off duty, but SB 249 does not exempt law enforcement from these restrictions, making them illegal gun owners when they're defending us or themselves. SB 249 would strip them of the guns listed in the removal from citizens on this, so you might want to be looking into that one. Anyway, thank you for your time.
The last chance for anyone else to make a comment? Okay. All right, let me try and respond as best way I can. I'll just say on that last one, 249, that's a state law that we don't have any authority over. So I'm not sure exactly what the nature of that is, but I'll be happy to take a look at it because I am concerned about that with law enforcement. Gas prices. In California, we have the highest gas prices in the country, in part because we have higher standards for emissions control in the state of California. As a direct result of a couple of areas in our state, major areas in our state, which are considered non-attainment states. That is, we do not attain the level of compliance under existing federal law. So as a result, California is required to produce gasoline that is refined somewhat differently than the other 49 states. As a result, we don't have an opportunity to get more supply from other parts of the country as other parts of the country do. And so when you have a fire like they had at the Chevron refinery, that marginal decrease in supply affects us immediately here in California, number one. Number two, in California, we have one of the highest taxes and fees, set of taxes and fees imposed by the state on gasoline per gallon. In other words, there is a tax, there's a federal tax on gasoline, but there's also a state tax, and we also have an excise tax here in California. And that adds tremendously to the cost. But the largest single part of gasoline is that which is encountered in terms of the crude oil. And the crude oil is that which is available on the world market. Basically, a barrel goes for the same thing in California as it does a barrel of crude in some other parts of the country and some other parts of the world. So it's a question of supply. And frankly, we are not doing everything we should do in the United States to increase our own supply. We have available supplies in Anwar, which is in Alaska. At one time, I represented, with the law firm, represented the Native American community that actually exists in Anwar. They were strongly in favor of producing in their own area. They did not want to destroy their environment, but they believed it could be done effectively. We have limited ourselves in terms of availability of petroleum product into the United States from Canada. We're putting roadblocks, the administration put roadblocks into the Keystone Pipeline. It just seems to me what we ought to, well, if you'd like to have your petroleum come from Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Middle East instead of from Canada, that might make sense, but I would rather have it come as close as possible.
Green energy.
I happen to be one of those who believes that we could do environmentally protected drilling offshore of California with royalties going to the state of California in the numbers of billions of dollars, which would help both two ways. It would increase the overall production available to the United States, thus driving down the largest contributor to gases, but it would also contribute a tremendous amount to us bringing down our state deficit. And you know, we've got problems at the federal level. We've got big problems in California that affects us all the way from many of the subjects you were talking about here today, from the services that can be provided by the state and all the way down to education. So I happen to be one of those who believes that we ought to apply American technology, American skills, American production, American products, that is the kinds of drilling equipment and so forth developed in America that we are now selling down to Brazil. The President of the United States goes down to Brazil and congratulates them for buying American drilling material and using American technology and says, we want to be your biggest customer. Well, that's sending jobs down to Brazil that ought to be here in the United States. That's sending American dollars down to Brazil that ought to be here in the United States. So I think we need to have a better job. I do support alternative energy and its research and development, but I believe we've gone overboard in some areas. I mean, the idea that we take corn, that is a staple of many diets of people around the world. It's also that which is the main feed, one of the main, if not the main, feed that's used for cattle in the United States, that therefore ends up increasing the cost of every kind of hamburger that you have or steak that you have or anything that has to do with meat. To me, it doesn't make sense. I also happen to think it's immoral because we are raising artificially the price of a product that's used by people around the world to eat. And yet, studies now have shown that per unit of energy produced by corn, that is corn ethanol, is less than what it takes to put the energy into it in the first place. And yet we have this silly idea that we subsidize and require corn ethanol in our gas tanks. That's an example of what was supposed to be a green energy source that didn't prove out, and yet we've gone crazy with it. And I think it makes no sense at all, and it harms us. In terms of the air in California, actually, generally speaking, the air in California is better than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, in part because we made some changes. It's been pretty nasty the last couple of days. We have 3 major fires in the overall Northern California region, the Sacramento region. If you walked out yesterday afternoon, all you had to do was look up and you saw the ash coming down. That's a contributing factor along with the heat that we're having at the present time. But I think if you're going to ask the American people or the California constituency to support things that help us get cleaner air, you ought to acknowledge when we get cleaner air that where they have taken certain steps that have allowed that to happen, that's good. I grew up in Southern California. I remember when Bob Hope used to make jokes. He'd say, I'm from Los Angeles. I don't trust any air I can't see because smog was that bad. It is much better in the state. It is much healthier. With respect to No Child Left Behind, I know that was an effort, a bipartisan effort by President Bush and by Senator Kennedy and by Republican and Democratic leaders in the House on education. I think it was a good idea that's really gone wrong. I think there's too much of the federal government telling local school districts how they have to spend the money, and frankly, I would release those monies to go directly to the states and well, actually to the school districts, and not have us in Washington or Department of Education telling you exactly how you got to use it. I think it is good to have some gauges on how well our students are doing from school to school and district to district, but that ought to be a tool, and that ought not to be the main thing that drives everything, because I've heard from enough teachers throughout this district about the differences in different schools, the differences in different classrooms, how you have a different mix of students, some who have English that they've learned all their life, others who don't have it spoken at home. And so one classroom can have different challenges than another classroom, and sometimes when we impose a strict standard from the federal government, that doesn't make the most sense. And I think we heard from somebody here representing the local school district that is a problem. Let me try and go through one of these other things here. Okay, people have talked about the Ryan budget. Yes, I voted for the Ryan budget. Let me explain what it is and what it isn't with respect to Medicare. There are those who say that the Republicans voted to end Medicare as we know it. That was called the lie of the year last year by an objective fact-finding organization called PolitiFact. Other fact checkers found that to be the case because it is not true. I did vote against the president's health care bill. That health care bill included within it a $700 billion cut in Medicare, and that money was not used to shore up the Medicare trust fund. It was removed from Medicare and utilized for other brand new programs that were in the health care bill. I did not vote for that. I did not vote to cut that $700 billion out. That was in the president's health care proposal. The president's health care proposal, which you say why we should spend time repealing and so forth, contains within it a 15-member panel that is not answerable to you or to me or to Congress, anybody else, that will make the decisions as to what health care procedures can be used, whether people are too old to get certain health care procedures, whether you could have a hip replacement or not. Frankly, I think that's the wrong way to go about attempting to control costs.
That's not true.
Not true.
Well, that happens to be true. There's a bipartisan effort. Listen, I sat here and listened quietly to every statement that was made. I was polite and listened to you and others did. I would ask that you would have the same. Look, I happen to be privy to the emails that told you, some of you exactly to try and disrupt the meeting, but that is not the way we're going to handle this. You have made your statements. I did not interrupt you, and I asked only for courtesy and civility. One of the things that bothers me, you down, you interrupt people, you call them names, instead of saying, I respectfully disagree with you. I don't happen to believe what you believe, and these are the reasons. Now, you can argue and put up your posters and everything else, but the fact of the matter is there was $700 billion cut from Medicare, and the way that that program attempts to try and control costs is setting up a nationwide panel made up of 15 people that is very similar to the NICE program, NICE, which is the panel that is used in Britain to control costs and determine which procedures, which surgeries, which medicines can be used, which people can go for them. I frankly disagree with it. Now, you may think that's the best way of doing it. Our proposal is uses a different form. First of all, it makes no changes in Medicare for anyone 55 and older. Anyone 55 and older, the Medicare program as currently exists will not change for you under the budget that we adopted. For those 54 and younger, we will have to make changes, because if we do not, there will not be a program for you. There is an organization called the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It is an official arm of the federal government. They are required by law to look at the state of Medicare and issue a national report. They issued a report and they said Medicare will be bankrupt by 2024. That's the official analysis. There are others who have analyzed it. Other estimates have calculated the program will be out of money in 2016. That's why we have to do something about the program with respect to those who are 54 and under. And the proposal that we have come up with is not the original Ryan proposal. It is now a proposal based on the principles developed by Congressman Ryan and Senator Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, who is considered a moderate Democrat. It will allow people to continue with Medicare if that's what they want, essentially, but will then provide a different option, which is based on the federal employee health plans that currently exist. Medicare would go out and they would solicit proposals for approved plans. And those plans would have to have a minimum of comprehensive care. They would then determine from the bids on a yearly basis what the second least costly program available that provides all those services that are of a comprehensive nature. That would be the amount that would be provided to everybody under Medicare. If you selected the cheaper program, if you selected it, you'd actually get the difference. If you decided you wanted a program that was more expensive, you would have the amount of money determined by the government to go directly to the program, and then you would pay the difference because you wanted additional cost. But in no case would you get less than the comprehensive coverage that is available today. The idea is that the choice and competition given to you, and again, this is down the line, 11 years, I think, when it would first go into effect. The idea is that the choice given to the individual person and the competition from these various plans that would try and present themselves before the federal government Medicare system, that those two things together would help bring the cost down. And that's based on a model that's been used with Part D in Medicare and with Medicare Advantage. And Medicare Advantage is utilized at a higher percentage in this area than almost any other area in the country. And of that amount that will be taken out of Medicare that I mentioned in the President's plan, a significant amount will be taken out of Medicare Advantage. So our area will be disadvantaged more than most other areas of the country. So if you use the model of Medicare Advantage with the idea that the government would have gone in and picked the second lowest bidder for the amount, and if you look what we've done with prescription D, Part D for prescription, it suggests that we would have a savings of at least 6%. I think it may be as high as 9%, but at least 6% over what the other overall cost increase would be for Medicare. That is the alternative to having a panel that tells you what you can do and what you can't do. Now you can disagree with it. You can say, I'd rather have a panel making that decision rather than me making that, not me, but I mean somebody who's 55, 54 and younger at some time in the future. You may believe that's the case. All right, let's talk about that. That's the difference between the two programs. The President has said, Medicare as it currently exists cannot continue. There is agreement on that. So for people to get up and say, well, it ends Medicare as we know it. Medicare as we know it is going to end because it cannot be sustained. What we're attempting to do is to protect those who are already retired and those who are within hailing distance, 55 and over, with the expectations that they have built in, that this is the system they're comfortable with, this is what works. We can give ourselves some breathing room to try and orchestrate a program that will be available to those in the future. So, look, the 2011 lie of the year was that we end Medicare as we end Medicare. We don't. What we attempt to do is save Medicare. And again, you can disagree. You can say you'd rather have another approach. And it's not a voucher program, as someone said. It is not a voucher program. Voucher program is where they give you the money and then you have to go pick the program and so forth. This is a program where the money goes directly to the carrier that you would pick. One from Medicare-approved options. Medicare helps pay that amount in Medicaid. And the way it works is, the wealthier you are, frankly, the less of the benefit that you would get, and those at the lower end of the scale would actually get more. So it is scaled in that regard. Let me talk about, someone asked about veterans and sequestration. And what are we going to do about those veterans coming back? Look, if there's one thing that members of Congress, Democrat, Republican, House, and the Senate agree on, is to take care of our veterans. We disagree sometimes over the facts, but if you look back over the last 10 years, every time there has been a question about it and the facts have been presented, you will find members of Congress coming together on a bipartisan basis to take care of it. My office has been specifically involved in pushing the United States Army, actually military services, but primarily at Walter Reed, to develop, to allow a pilot program on the development of a different modality for dealing with traumatic injury syndrome. It's a modality that doesn't work for all. But it does work for some, and there was some reluctance from the bureaucracy and the military to deal with it. So we held an informal hearing. I invited veterans and members of the military who've been able to utilize this and work for them. I invited the head of the overall program at Walter Reed, and I will tell you, when he first came in, he was afraid that I was trying to pull something on him or that I was going to use the power of the Congress to come down on his head, and I said, Major, no, I guess it was Colonel at the time. I said, my job here is just to show you what these people have been through, show you that what's worked with them, and ask you to at least look at it. At the end of 2.5 or 3 hours, he said, you know, you've convinced me that we ought to try it. It is a modality that is used. It doesn't work in every case, but it seems to me we ought to be open to using all kinds of modalities to help our veterans. These brain trauma injuries are a greater challenge than we've ever had before because, as was suggested in Vietnam, people with these injuries wouldn't have survived. They are surviving now, and we have to do everything we can to help them become as whole as they possibly can, and we should not spare an expense on that. I recently flew back from Washington, D.C. on a flight with a fellow who served the United States Army as a sergeant. He lost one of his legs. He had a prosthesis. And he told me that he was one of several handful of vets who've been asked by the Army to see if they could break their latest version of the prosthesis. So, among other things, he jumps out of airplanes. And he said he broke the first iteration of it. The second one was stronger, and he was in the third or fourth. And we're doing far more than we've done before. I'm not saying it's complete or we can never be satisfied, but we are doing more. And if you have a particular issue about where you don't think we are, please let us know, because it is not partisan. You find members working together in administration after administration doing that. Is there climate change? Yeah, there's climate change. Yeah, I don't doubt there's climate change. The question is is human activity the major force in that?
Yes.
And is human activity in the United States or in California the major force in that? And are there things that we can do here that will make a sufficient change? Or are we putting ourselves into a non-competitive position vis-a-vis other parts of the world? That's the question. I am very leery of theories that suggest that decisions ought to be made about the way you or I live our lives by somebody as far away as the United Nations or Geneva or some other thing. I just, I'm very skeptical of that, and I don't apologize for that. I think decisions made in a governmental sense are best when they're made closest to the people, and a lot of the agenda that I've seen with some of those who want us to change our lifestyle and change these things based on the fact of climate change, frankly, will cause us to give up our decision-making, our freedom, and I'm frankly not willing to do that. Someone mentioned ADA access, Americans with Disability Act access. My program takes away no civil rights. My program, my bill, would actually try and achieve the goals of access more readily than exists now. Right now, you have a lot of lawsuits where they don't lead to access, but they lead to monies being paid and people being scared and small businesses not knowing what to do. And I've spoken with a number of small businesses in my district these last 2 weeks when I was home 10 days before that. And a number of them have been subjected to these letters that basically don't give them any information on what they've done, but threaten to sue them and say, pay us $4,000 or pay us $8,000. My bill would say that if you're going to make a claim that there's a violation of ADA, you have the obligation to tell the owner-operator what the complaint is with enough specificity that they know what the violation is. And there ought to be a period of time in which they can examine it themselves, see how much it costs them, and then present you, the complainant, in writing with how they're going to take care of it, and then a period of time for them to take care of it. That doesn't undercut ADA. That extends, in my judgment, the goal of that. All right, on spending and money. As we sit here, your federal government is paying $4.1 billion more than we have today. Tomorrow they will spend $4.1 billion more than they have. Yesterday they paid $4.1 billion more than they had. This year we will spend more than $1 trillion more than we have. Last year we spent more than $1 trillion more than we had. The year before we spent more than $1 trillion more than we had. The year before that we spent $1 trillion more than we had. It can't work. I don't want America to turn into Greece. And frankly, we're on the road in terms of our economic circumstances. Now, California may be a little further ahead than we are, but the fact of the matter, it's unsustainable. I'm worried about the fact we're not creating jobs. And it's not BS when I'm talking about job creation, it's real fact. We are not creating jobs. We have the highest unemployment rate sustained for over 40 months since at least World War II, if not the Great Depression. We have the longest period of time average person is unemployed that we've had since we began taking statistics. We are not creating the number of jobs necessary to do what the President said his program was going to do, which was to bring us, down to 5.3%? Isn't that what he said? If we pass the stimulus package? We're at 8.2% now. We haven't had that before. We are on, in my judgment, a guide path towards Europe. And if you look at Europe over the last several decades versus the United States, they have not created the number of jobs necessary for our young people to get jobs. So that is my greatest concern. And we need to create that job base so we can do the things that are necessary. Now, we have a proposal of tax reform. And it would actually enable us to bring rates down by closing loopholes. Frankly, I thought that's what most people were for. A lot of people supposedly pay high tax rates, but they got a bunch of loopholes and distortions and carve-outs and a whole bunch of things And guess what? The wealthier you are, the more you can afford to hire lawyers and accountants to do that for you. The less money you make, the least likely you are to do that. So if we were to get rid of a large number of these loopholes, we'd be able to bring rates down, and we'd still bring in more money than we're bringing in right now. Our corporate tax rate is higher than I believe every other major industrial country in the world save one.
No.
Yes, it is. The fact of the matter is, I want people to take the money they make overseas and bring it back to the United States and create jobs here. And the way you do that is you make it attractive for them to bring the money back here. Right now, it is not attractive for them to bring the money back here. So I am for real tax reform that allows us to move in the right direction and gets jobs going. There's a place for government, there's no doubt about that. There's a place for local government, there's a place for county government, there's a place for state government, there's a place for federal government, but government does not create wealth. Government takes wealth, government can redistribute wealth, government can't create wealth. And we need to start creating wealth in this country so we can create more jobs, so we can have more economic activity, so that we can be competitive against the rest of the world. And that means we've got to do those things that allow job creation, primarily small and medium-sized businesses, but frankly, large businesses to create more jobs. I want them to do so as well. Last thing I just say about marijuana, medicinal marijuana. When I was Attorney General, Prop 215 was passed. One of the things Prop 215 did not address was distribution centers. They specifically did not, because if it had been in there, it would not have passed. And so then the state of California had to come along several years later and figure out how to do it, and didn't do a very good job of it, and the local governments didn't do a very, very good job of it. I enforced the law that existed at that time. I'll continue to enforce to support enforcement of the law, whatever it is. I actually supported, along with State Assemblyman Vasconcellos, who's a strong supporter of legalizing marijuana, I supported a study to be done about the effectiveness of medical marijuana here in the state of California. And that study was completed a couple of years ago. The results of that study were that there are some benefits to the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes, but far less than many people said, and suggested it ought to be only done under a prescription basis. And in fact, there are efforts being developed right now to see if you can actually deliver the medicinal effects of marijuana without the highs that have been developed, and to do it in a controlled way. And for those for which that would serve a purpose, I would certainly support that. So, let's see. We've got 7 minutes over time, but let me just...
You have to address the reasons of people coming to your office and not...
Oh, well, the people who come to my office, I mean, a number of those people who came to my office actually came to a meeting I had down at the Metro Chamber of Commerce, and probably populated the room more than any other group, and we had a free and fair exchange on the issue of ADA and a number of these other issues. I mean, that was a face-to-face meeting that took place. They've been at my office, talked with my staff. We have town hall meetings for the very purpose of people being able to do it. I will challenge you to find another member of Congress in this area that has more town hall meetings or more teletown hall meetings, or is more open to the public than I am in my office is. We have, I think we've had 12 teletown hall meetings this year. And with all due respect, I have pointed out, I can't have a town hall meeting in an area that is not my official district now. It's against the law. I'm not allowed to use tax dollars for that purposes. I can only have them in this area. In fact, when we sent the notice out for this meeting, among other places, we sent it up to Galt, even though Galt's no longer in the new district, because I thought I still represent those folks. This is a meeting that they can get to. And so we did it. We're allowed to do that. I could not send it to places that are not in my district now, but would be in the new district. That is a misuse of taxpayer funds, and we try not to do it. We're going to have another town hall meeting
Thursday.
Thursday, but where? Where is it?
Folsom.
Folsom, and then we're having one next
22nd, Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Carmine.
we have
We'll be there.
next week in
Last year,
Carmine. So we're going to have the same sort of setup. So thank you very, very much for being here. I appreciate all of your words.
King 10, King 12, in front of building.
I was thinking about it.
Dan.
Dan.
You respond to that.
I was about
I see that you got that. You got it.
and then
Talked to her a number of times. I was hoping to maybe meet her. We're moving our headquarters down here in Elk Grove. BMW. 9136. Used to be coding building. What's the location? 9136 also Boulevard. I know where the 90. I know where that block is. So yeah. Thanks for your service. Thanks for
And he's like, oh, this one's just like Mega Edinburgh. It's like, right, overcharging me for my service. Correct. It will be exactly like
Medicare Advance program.
then 100% right.